Add staff member. In this lesson, you will learn how to add staff members, providers, and generic provider to OP Notify, and how to activate and deactivate staff members in OP Notify. You are the practice administrator, and you have just received access to OP Notify. After creating the front desk role, you will now add the users and staff members to OP Notify. We will add the front desk staff member that will be in charge of creating events and on-demand notifications in OP Notify. Let's get started. First, we will log into OP Notify. Access your practices link and click it. Log in using your username, email, and your password. We are taken to the dashboard. On the left side of the screen, click to expand the user administration group and select staff members. On the left side of the screen, you will see users that have already been added. The OP Practice Admin user will be visible, as will the Practice Administrator. The OP Practice Admin user will be used solely by the OP support team to assist and troubleshoot as needed. To add a new staff member, click the +Add Staff button. Verify that the active checkbox is selected. Enter the unique email address of the new staff. This will be the staff member's login. Next, you have three options when to send the confirmation: send now, send on a specific date, or send manually. We will click the Send Confirmation Email On radio button and click on the calendar to select a date. You can also type in the date in the text box here. Next, verify that the user type selected is staff member. Enter the staff member name in the display name fields. The biography, phone, and photo fields are optional, so we will not fill them in at this time. Next, we will complete the staff details. Next to Associated Facility, we will click the drop-down to select the practice. Next, click the drop-down arrow next to Select Role. We will assign this user to the front desk role we just created. If the user needs to be in multiple roles, you can add them here by clicking the Add Associated Facility Role button and repeating the process. Next, click the drop-down arrow next to Default Facility and select the practice, and then the location to default to when logging into OP Notify. This is a required field. If they do not have a default facility, select the most common one. Finally, we need to associate this user with the user's credentials in OP. Search the list for the user, then click the user to select. Click the right arrow to move the selected staff to the panel on the right. When completed, click the Save button. The user is saved and appears in the table on the left. Next, we will create an account for each provider that has a schedule in OP. To begin, expand the User Administration group and select Providers. A list of providers will appear on the left. Right now it is blank because we have not added any providers. To add a new provider, click the +Add Provider button. Verify that the active checkbox is selected. Enter the email address of the provider. This email address must be unique. If you are creating a provider that uses a common email, then you will need to use that email with a +1 at the end to designate this as a unique address in the system. This will be the provider login. For the Send Confirmation option, we will select Send Confirmation Email manually. A provider will not need to log into OP Notify, so we will choose the option to manually send the confirmation email. The providers only need to be in the system so that they and their schedules will show up in OP Notify. Next, select Provider as the user type. Enter the provider's name in the display name fields. Select the appropriate gender radio button. We will leave the biography, specialty, languages, phone, and photo fields blank, since they are optional. Next, we will complete the provider details. Click the drop-down next to Associated Facility and select the practice that this provider is associated with. Click the drop-down next to select the role. We will choose Front Desk from the list. Since the provider typically will not log in, the best practice is to assign them the role with the least amount of permissions. Next, click on the drop-down for Default Facility and select the default practice and then the location. Next, we will add the associated user in OP. Search for the user in the left column, then click to select. Click the right arrow button to move the selected provider to the panel on the right. Next, we will verify that the appointment request in checked for appointment resources. We will leave the following fields blank: participating insurance plans, accepting new patients, and permissions. When finished, click the Save button. Next, we will create an account for the generic provider. Setting up OP Notify requires the creation of a generic provider. The generic provider is used for appointment reminders the practice has scheduled for non-provider staff, such as nurse, flu clinic, or lactation. To add the generic provider, click the plus Add Provider button. Verify that the active checkbox is selected. Next, we will enter the email address. For the generic provider, it is best practice to use the email address of the practice administrator using the format practiceadminemail+1@domain.com. For the Send Confirmation Email, we will select the Send Confirmation Email Manually radio button. We will not need to send the confirmation email as this is a placeholder for other users. Next, we will verify that the user type is provider. We will type the display name as generic provider. Optionally, you can select a gender. We will leave this blank. We will also leave the biography, specialty, languages, phone and photo fields blank. Next, we will complete the provider details. First, we will select the associated facility. We'll click the drop-down next to Associated Facility and select the practice. Next, we will click the drop-down for Select Role and choose Front Desk. When finished, we will select the default facility by clicking the drop-down and selecting the practice. This is a required field. Next, we will add the associated user in OP. When Office Practicum sets up your practice for Notify, a generic provider record is created within IntelliChart. Associate this provider by simply highlighting the practice name, Generic Provider, in the left column, and click the right arrow to move the selected user to the panel on the right. Next, we will verify that the appointment request in checked for appointment resources. We will leave the following fields blank: participating insurance plans, accepting new patients, and permissions. When we are finished, we will click the Save button. Next, we will navigate back to the staff members. We added a user here that is not part of our practice any longer. To deactivate them, we will click the checkbox next to the name to select, then click the Actions drop-down arrow. Here we have the choice to activate, deactivate, or send confirmation email again. We will click Deactivate. If this person comes back to our practice, we can reactivate them by going to the list of deactivated users. We'll click on the drop-down next to Show, then select the checkbox next to Inactive. We see the user that we just deactivated with a red dot next to their name, showing they are inactive. To reactivate, click the checkbox next to the user and select Actions, and click Activate. We may want to resend the activation email. Alternatively, if you choose Send Confirmation Email manually when creating a user, you can do that here. Click the checkbox next to the user to select. Then click Actions and select Send Confirmation Email. The confirmation email will be sent to their listed email address. And that is how you create and edit staff members.